She was standing on my doorstep in the middle of a Tuesday afternoon, and I almost didn't recognize her. That's the part that still gets me, even now. My own sister, my younger sister, Claire, who I have known every single day of her 29 years on this earth, was standing 3 feet away from me, and for one terrible second, I thought she was a stranger. Her left eye was swollen nearly shut. There was a cut along her jawline that had been cleaned up but not properly treated. She was holding her right arm against her stomach in a way that told me, from years of training, that something in there was either cracked or badly bruised. And she was smiling, this small, apologetic, exhausted smile, like she was sorry for interrupting my afternoon. "Hey, Jess," she said. I pulled her inside before she finished the word. "I'm a corrections officer. Have been for 6 years, stationed at a facility about 40 minutes outside of Columbus, Ohio. Before that I spent 3 years in the Army, 2 of them overseas. I've seen a lot of things I wish I could unsee. I've been in situations that required me to stay calm when every instinct in my body was screaming. I pride myself on that, the ability to look at something hard and stay level. I was not level when I saw my sister's face that afternoon. I sat her down at my kitchen table and I made her tea because I needed something to do with my hands, and I set it in front of her, and I sat across from her, and I waited. She wrapped both hands around the mug and stared into it and didn't say anything for almost 2 minutes. I watched the steam curl up between us. "How bad is the arm?" I finally asked. "Probably just bruised," she said. "Claire, it's fine, Jess. I'm fine. You are not fine." I kept my voice even. "You're going to let me look at it, and then you're going to tell me what happened, and I'm going to sit here and listen to the whole thing without saying a word until you're done, okay?" She looked up at me then. Her good eye was red from crying, or from not sleeping, or both. She nodded once. I came around the table and carefully pushed up her sleeve. The bruising ran from her wrist to her elbow on the inside of her forearm, deep purple and greenish yellow, which meant it wasn't new. The fresh injury was higher up, closer to her shoulder. When I pressed gently along the bone, she flinched but didn't pull away. "Nothing's broken," I said. "But you need ice on this." "I know." I got the ice pack from the freezer and wrapped it in a dish towel and sat back down. She held it against her arm and went back to staring at the tea. "How long?" I asked. She knew what I was asking. She didn't pretend otherwise. "About a year," she said. "Maybe a little longer." I had met her husband, Derek, twice. Once at their wedding 14 months ago and once at Thanksgiving. He was tall, well-dressed, the kind of man who laughed easily at other people's jokes and remembered details about your life that you'd mentioned in passing. He'd asked me about my job with what seemed like genuine interest. He'd refilled my mother's water glass without being asked. I had thought, both times, that my sister had done well for herself. I sat very still and let her talk. "It hadn't started with hitting," she told me. "It had started with small things. He didn't like when she made plans without telling him first. He thought she spent too much time on the phone with me and with our mother. He said things, not cruel things, not at first, but comments that landed in a specific way, that had a way of making her feel like she was always slightly falling short of something, though she could never quite articulate what. She started adjusting herself in tiny ways, calling me less, canceling plans, choosing her words more carefully around him. "I thought I was just being a good wife," she said. He framed it that way, like I was finally learning how to be a real partner. The financial piece came next. He handled the accounts, he said, because he was better with money. She had access to one debit card attached to an account he controlled, with a monthly allowance. If she needed something outside of that, she asked. He usually said yes, but the asking was the point. The asking was the mechanism. "I didn't even realize what was happening," she said. "I had a master's degree and a career, and I had somehow ended up asking my husband if I could buy a birthday gift for my own mother. She'd quit her job 8 months into the marriage. He'd encouraged it, said she deserved a break, said he made more than enough. By the time she understood that the job had also been a lifeline, it felt too late to go back. The hitting started around month 10. The first time he said it would never happen again, she said. He cried. I had never seen him cry before. I actually felt sorry for him. I pressed my hands flat against my thighs under the table. I had promised her I would not say a word until she was finished. I kept that promise. It happened again, she said. And then again, and then it became a pattern. I started tracking it in my head. Like weather. I knew when the pressure was building. I learned how to move through the house in a way that didn't set things off. I got very good at it. She paused. That felt like an accomplishment for a while. Like a skill. Why didn't you call the police? I asked when she finally stopped. I asked it quietly, without judgment, because I genuinely needed to understand. She looked at me with something complicated in her eyes. Because he is the police, she said. I went still. Not locally, she said quickly. He works in a county over, but he knows people everywhere, Jess. And he told me he was very clear about this. Very calm. The way he gets when he's being serious. He told me that if I ever called anyone, if I ever tried to leave, he would make sure the story that got told was mine. That I was unstable. That I had a history of incidents at work, which he would manufacture evidence for. He said no one would believe me over him. She paused. And I believed him. Does he know you're here? He thinks I'm at the grocery store. I have to be back in 2 hours. Something hardened in my chest. Not anger, exactly. Something quieter and more purposeful than anger. Okay, I said. Okay? She looked at me like she wasn't sure what that meant. I'm not going to let you go back there, I said. Jess, you don't understand. I understand more than you think. I looked at her directly. I need you to listen to me now, the same way I listened to you. Can you do that? She hesitated. Then she nodded. I told her what I was thinking. Not all of it, just enough. She stared at me across the table with the ice pack pressed against her arm and her tea gone cold between her hands. That's insane, she said. Probably, I agreed. He'll know I'm not there. Not if we do this right. I leaned forward. You said he's working late tomorrow night. He won't be home until after 9, usually not until 10. Even better, Jess. She set the ice pack down. I'm serious. If something goes wrong, nothing's going to go wrong. I said it the way I used to say things to new recruits when they were scared. Steady and certain and not unkind. But I need you to walk me through the house. Every room. Every detail. What he does when he gets home. Where he goes first. What he says. Everything. She looked at me for a long moment. Something shifted in her face, not quite hope, because hope was a thing she'd gotten careful about, but something adjacent to it. She started talking. She and Derek lived in a 2-story colonial, about 20 minutes from my apartment. 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, a kitchen that opened onto a small backyard with a wooden deck he'd built himself, and was very proud of. He came home between 9 and 10 most weeknights, entered through the garage, went directly to the kitchen for a glass of water, then to his office on the first floor to check something on his computer before coming upstairs. She walked me through the layout from memory, drawing it on the back of an envelope I handed her. The location of the security system panel, he had changed the code and not told her the new one, which she said casually, like it was unremarkable, and I filed it away. The placement of his phone charger, his work bag, the items on his nightstand. She knew his rhythms the way someone knows a weather system they've been living under for years. She also told me about a folder. I've been keeping records, she said, since about 6 months ago. Dates, times, what happened, photographs. I saved them to a cloud account he doesn't know about. I don't know what I was going to do with them. I just needed them to exist somewhere. I reached across the table and covered her hand with mine. That was smart, I said. That was really, really smart, Claire. Her chin wobbled for a second. She pressed her lips together. I need you to send me that login, I said. Tonight, from a phone he hasn't touched, and I need you to call your attorney friend from college, Rachel, right? I need you to call her tonight too. It's late. She'll answer. Claire looked at me for a long moment. Then she picked up her phone. The next evening, I drove to their neighborhood and parked 2 streets over, and waited until I saw Derek's truck pull out of the driveway at 7:15 inches the morning. Claire had told me he had back-to-back meetings until at least 6, which gave me the better part of a day. She let me in through the back door. We stood in her kitchen, and she looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read, something between terrified and resolved, which in my experience is the most functional state a person can be in. You don't have to stay, I told her. Actually, I need you to not stay. Where am I supposed to go? My apartment. There's a key under the left side of the 3rd step. Take what you need: important documents, anything irreplaceable, medications. Don't take so much that it's obvious. You have about 4 hours before I'd want you clear of the area. And what are you going to do? I'm going to be here when he gets home, I said. That's all you need to know right now." She looked at me for a long time. I could see her working through it, the same way she'd probably worked through 100 decisions in this house, measuring the risk, calculating the cost. "He's going to be so angry," she said quietly. "I know," I said. "I'm counting on it." She left at 9:40 the morning with one duffel bag and her important documents in a manila folder, and the expression of someone who was not entirely sure they were doing the right thing, but was doing it anyway. I watched her car back out of the driveway from the front window. Then I turned around and looked at the house. I had done something similar to this once, overseas, in a situation I am not going to detail here except to say that waiting in a space that belongs to someone else, for someone you know is coming, requires a very specific kind of patience. You have to make yourself at home without becoming comfortable. You have to stay alert without becoming anxious. It's a balance. I knew the house now almost as well as my sister did. I'd walked every room that morning, not out of nosiness, but out of necessity. I needed to understand the space, the way she understood it, the way she had been forced to understand it, every sightline, every exit, every place where a person might feel cornered. I found things I wasn't looking for. In his office, in the bottom drawer of the filing cabinet, there was a folder with her name on it. Inside were printed emails, conversations she'd had with her college friends, her mother, me, printed out and organized by date. There were notes in his handwriting in the margins. Underlines. I stood in his office and I read through them, and I felt something cold move through me from my sternum outward. He had been monitoring her accounts, her personal email, her texts, most likely. He had documented her communications, the same way she had documented his violence, except his documentation was for control, and hers was for survival. I took photographs of everything in that folder and sent them to myself and to Rachel, who had confirmed by that morning that she was taking Claire's case and had already begun the process of filing for an emergency protective order. Then I closed the drawer and went to sit in the living room and wait. He got home at 9:47. I heard the garage door, and then the internal door, and then his footsteps heavy, even, unhurried, going directly to the kitchen, exactly as Claire had described. The refrigerator opening, the sound of a glass being filled, then silence. And I knew he was standing in the kitchen noticing something was different. The stillness of a house that has been prepared rather than simply occupied. His footsteps changed direction. He came to the doorway of the living room and stopped. I was sitting in the armchair across the room, not his chair, which Claire had pointed out with a small, exhausted irony, and I was looking directly at him. I had turned on the lamp to my left so that the light was good, and he could see my face clearly. I wanted to make sure there was no confusion about who he was looking at. He was a good-looking man. I'd remembered that from the wedding. Tall, dark hair going slightly gray at the temples, dressed well even after a full workday. He looked at me with an expression that moved through several phases in about 2 seconds: surprise, confusion, a quick and instinctive recalculation. "You must be Jessica," he said. His voice was very calm. "I am," I said. "Claire isn't here." "I know." He leaned one shoulder against the doorframe, arms crossing loosely over his chest. The posture of a man who was deciding how much to be bothered by this. "How did you get in?" "Claire let me in this morning." Something moved behind his eyes. "Claire let you into my house." "Our house," I said. "Technically. Until the divorce is finalized." The looseness went out of his posture. "I'm going to ask you to leave," he said. "I know," I said. "I'm going to stay a few more minutes. Then I'll go." I kept my voice the way I keep it at work when things are escalating level. Quiet. Not aggressive. Not backing down. "I want to talk to you first. I have nothing to say to you." "That's fine. I have things to say to you." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't shift in the chair. "I know about the folder in your filing cabinet. I know about the email monitoring. I know about the account you've been controlling, and the job you encouraged her to leave, and the code you changed on the security system so she couldn't leave without you knowing." I paused. "And I know about the arm, Derek. I know about all of it." His jaw tightened. "You're going to be hearing from her attorney," I continued. "You've already been served. She and Rachel handled that this afternoon. There's an emergency protective order in process, and the records she's been keeping for the last 6 months, the photographs, the documentation, Rachel has all of it now." I watched his face. "I know you think you can control how this story gets told. I understand that's something you've put a lot of effort into. I want you to know that that window has closed." He looked at me for a long moment. The calm was still there on the surface, but underneath it something was working hard. "She won't go through with it," he said finally. "She already has. She's done this before." She hasn't done this before," I said. "Because she didn't have what she needed before. She has it now." I stood up then, slowly, and I was suddenly aware in a very practical way that I had 6 years of corrections work and 3 years of military service in my body, and he was aware of it too. Not as a threat, just as a fact. "I'm not here to threaten you or to cause you any legal problems. That's Rachel's job, and she is very good at it. I'm here because I needed to look at you, and I needed you to understand that she is not alone." He said nothing. "She has never been alone," I said. "I need you to understand that now, even if you didn't understand it before." I picked up my keys from the side table and walked past him toward the kitchen and out through the garage. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Claire was at my apartment when I got home. She had made dinner, which surprised me, something simple. Pasta. The kind she used to make when we were in our early 20s and sharing an apartment and broke and happy. She was standing at my stove and she turned around when I came in and looked at me with this expression that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Not relief, exactly. Not happiness. Something deeper than both of those things. Like a door opening in a room that had been sealed for a very long time. "How did it go?" she asked. "He knows," I said. "He knows exactly where things stand." She turned back to the stove, stirred the pasta. I sat down at my kitchen table, the same table where she'd sat the day before with her cold tea and her ice pack and her apologetic smile, and I watched my sister cook dinner in my kitchen, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 2 days, which was something like the beginning of, okay. Rachel called the next morning. The protective order had been granted. Derek had retained an attorney, which was expected, but the documentation Claire had preserved was substantial, and the evidence of email monitoring was significant in ways that his attorney would have a very hard time explaining away. It took 4 months for the divorce to be finalized. They were not easy months. There were attempts to contact her through mutual friends, a few incidents that required follow-up with Rachel, a period where Claire second-guessed herself so severely that she barely left my apartment for 2 weeks. I want to be honest about that because I think people deserve the honest version of these stories. The legal process is long, the emotional process is longer. There is no single moment where everything becomes fine, but there were also other moments. The morning Claire called the HR department at her old company and found out her position had been backfilled, but there was a similar opening in a different department, and the woman she spoke to remembered her and said she'd always been sorry she left. The afternoon she opened her own bank account for the first time in over a year, and the teller handed her the new debit card, and she held it in both hands and looked at it like it was something almost unbelievable. The evening she called our mother and talked for 2 hours, the longest they'd spoken in over a year, and I could hear my mother crying through the wall. Domestic violence doesn't look the way most people expect it to. It rarely starts with hitting. It starts with small adjustments to yourself, small permissions you surrender, small ways you learn to make yourself less than you are so that the space around you stays calm. By the time it becomes physical, you've already been conditioned to believe that the situation is normal, that you are the problem, that leaving is more dangerous than staying. The financial control isn't incidental, it's structural. It is how a person with no money and no job and monitored communications remains trapped in a house with someone who has a badge. My sister was not weak. I want to make that clear. My sister was one of the most resourceful, careful, intelligent people I know, and she was still nearly destroyed by a system that was specifically designed to destroy her. That is not a reflection of her. That is a reflection of how sophisticated coercive control can become in the hands of someone who understands power. She has her own apartment now, 7 minutes from mine. She started the new job in March. She got a dog, a big, ridiculous golden retriever named Frank, who takes up most of her couch and looks at her like she invented the sun. I went over there last Sunday, and we sat on her small balcony with coffee, and watched Frank attempt to interact with a squirrel in the courtyard below, and she laughed. Really laughed. The way she used to laugh before, loud and unguarded. And I thought about that Tuesday afternoon when she appeared on my porch and I almost didn't recognize her. I recognize her now. She's still becoming herself again, which takes time, but I can see her more clearly with every month that passes. She's still my sister. She always was. He just made it hard to see her for a while. That part is over now.